Hello. I suggest you crochet a beautiful lace. Very simple knitting. Here is such a wonderful openwork, airy lace I got. At the edges of the lace, you can perform such rounding or just tie it in a straight line. This is the front side of the lace. This is the wrong side of this lace. This lace is knitted, starting from the middle. The middle is tied to the required length of the entire lace, and then this middle is tied on both sides. I knitted this lace from fine cotton in 50 grams. I have 280 meters and a thin 0.75 mm knitting hook. We perform the first loop. And we will tie a chain of 4 air loops. The first loop, the second, the third and the fourth. Then we perform 2 capes on the hook. We put the hook in the very first air loop and tie a column with 2 capes. Next, we perform 8 air loops, 2 capes on the hook. In the fourth loop we will tie a column with 2 capes. First, the first cape, the second cape and 2 loops together. Once again, we will tie 8 air loops. Two capes on the hook. In the fourth loop we will tie a column with 2 capes. And so we will tie the middle of this lace of the required length. We tied the middle of the base of this lace of the required length of the entire lace. Now we will tie this middle on both sides. First, we perform 4 air loops. The first, second, third, and fourth. Then we put 2 capes on the hook. We put the hook under a column with 2 capes in a ring and tie 5 columns with 2 capes. First, second column. The third column, the fourth column and the fifth column with 2 capes. Then we perform 3 capes on the hook. We start the hook in the next ring. We knit a magnificent column consisting of 5 columns with 3 capes. That is, we will tie 5 columns with 3 capes and 1 common vertex. The first column was executed, the second column with 3 capes, the third column with 3 capes. the fourth column with 3 capes, and the fifth column with 3 capes. Now we will tie all the loops on the hook with 1 loop. We fix it with air. We perform 6 air loops in a ring. We will tie a connecting column. A loop was captured and this loop was stretched through the main loop. Then 6 air loops, and in the same ring we will tie the same magnificent column consisting of 5 columns with 3 capes. In order for such a lush column to fit here, we will pull up the previous columns along the axis. We perform 3 capes on the hook, 1, 2, 3. We start the hook in this ring, tie the first column with 3 capes, the second column with 3 capes. The third is the fourth. And the fifth column with 3 capes. Now we will tie all the loops on the hook with 1 loop. We fix it with an air 1. It turned out that this ring has 2 petals, that is, 2 lush columns consisting of 5 columns with 2 capes, with 3 capes. Then we will also knit and alternate knitting. First, we perform 2 capes on the hook. We start the hook in the next ring. We tie 5 columns with 2 capes. The first column with 2 capes, the second column with 2 capes, the third column with 2 capes, the fourth column and the fifth column with 2 capes. And in the next ring we will tie the same 2 lush columns. We perform 3 capes on the hook. We start the hook in a ring. We knit 5 columns with 3 capes and 1 common vertex. The first column, the second column, the third column, the fourth column and the fifth column with 3 capes. Then we will tie all the loops with one loop. We fix it with air. We perform 6 air loops, wind the hook into a ring, tying the connecting column, stretched the loop, and this loop was stretched through the main loop. Then we will tie 6 air loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and pull up all the columns along the axis so that exactly the same magnificent column consisting of 5 columns with 3 capes fits into this ring. The first column with 3 capes, the second column with 3 capes, the third column with 3 capes, the fourth column with 3 capes, and the fifth column with 3 capes. We will tie all the loops with one loop, fasten them with air. So let's tie the whole row. I tied the whole row to the end on one side of the lace. This is how this row turns out. In the very last ring, I tied 20 columns with 2 capes. Now, on the other side of the lace, we will knit in the same way in a mirror image. I tied 20 columns with 2 capes into the first ring. Then she turned the knitting to the other side and tied the exact same row on the other side of the lace. In the ring, in which she tied the lush columns, she tied exactly the same lush columns from this side. And above the columns with 2 capes there are 5 columns, where she tied from above, she also tied 5 columns with 2 capes. This is what lace turns out to be. And now I will tie this lace again on both sides. I tied up the posts here. First, I tied 5 columns with 2 capes, and here I tied another 15 columns with 2 capes. I have completed the connecting column, and then I will tie the next row. Then we will tie the next row. We perform 6 air loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 3 capes on the hook side by side. In the loop we wind up the hook and tie a column with 3 capes. Then 1 air loop, 3 capes on the hook. In the next loop of the base we will tie a column with 3 capes. One air loop, 3 more capes on the hook. In the same loop we will tie the second column with 3 capes. So, we will tie 2 columns with 3 capes into each loop of the base, 1 air loop between the columns. Then we perform 3 capes on the hook. go to knitting the next arch. We start the hook in the first loop. We will also tie 2 columns with 3 capes into each loop of the base. The air loop between the columns here, in the same loop of the base, the second column with 3 capes, the air loop, in the next loop a column with 3 capes, on top of this column a picot of 3 air loops, a connecting column in the base, an air loop, 3 capes on the hook, in the same loop the second column with 3 capes. On top of the column we will tie a picot of 3 air loops. In the next loop of the base, we will also tie 2 columns with 3 capes. On top of the picot of 3 air loops. We tied columns with 3 capes over these columns. In total, there were 8 columns with 3 capes. And from above, 4 picots were performed on the top in the middle. We will also tie it over the next column. First, we perform 3 capes on the hook. Start the hook over the next group of columns and tie 8 columns with 3 capes in the same way, alternating with 1 air loop and tying 4 peaks on the top. So, I tied the lace on both sides, making 8 columns with 3 capes over each arch, and tying 4 picots in the middle. This is the result of lace. I didn't do picot on the edges, I just tied the columns with 3 capes. The casserole can be laced together. It will look very nice if you tie several such laces of the same length, connect them together and you will get a long openwork path for table decoration, for example.